Welcome to the presentation on our FEDucation innovations. My name is Janelle Moore and I will be your FEDucation instructor. I have been in this business for 25 years and you can learn more about me at zenfederal.com. I have, as part of my career over the last 25 years, either spent a significant chunk of it getting multiple master's degrees and advanced certifications while simultaneously working, or teaching in instructor-led training or online through webinars, which are very popular in the federal government. But what I've seen in the last about 8 years is a significant disruption in the federal training marketplace, if you will. Most commonly and most well known is the COVID-19 pandemic, which has, for all but the most essential personnel, forced the distance learning and the distance working virtual work models. But even before that, we started to see instructor-led training disappear. We saw companies go out of business. We've seen instructors retire or just stop doing it from burnout. It's very, very physically stressful and strenuous to have to lecture and run classes for 2, 3, 4 days in a row. And as an instructor myself, I would sometimes go in these courses that would have 35 or more people, and you could barely get through the content, let alone the questions. And I was constantly answering questions on breaks when I personally would have liked to have just used the restroom or had a snack to fuel up for the next session. But time was limited and they would sort of cattle car these classes in these departments and agencies. And it's just, at times it's a successful model, but other times it's not. And I preferred small group instruction where I could keep my classes less than like 15 people. But with the way things are now, even that's not possible. Something else is that the federal government, for all the things that it does in technologically innovative ways, in other ways we are really, really behind. Trying to run webinars on different platforms over the years, Cisco, Citrix, Group Spaces, freeconference.com, which wasn't free, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. Like, there are problems with all of them. And there's nothing worse than having 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour to get a message across, and you spend all of that time trying to help people get on where their firewalls are restricting access or their cameras are shut off by an administrator feature, department-wide for information security reasons. So there's a lot of reasons why these things have failed federal enterprise-wide. Next, you look at things that used to be tools of the trade to learn how to do business in the federal government. You have these scores of business developers, marketers, and salespeople who would historically use networking groups such as Women in Technology, Association for the Councils of Technology / Industry Advisory Council, AFIRM, which is the Association for Federal Information Resource Management, AFCEA, which heavily supports the Department of Defense market segments. All these different organizations and groups that hundreds of people would flock to for their content and their networking. These organizations are drying up. There's infighting in them. The same people that can go and have the budgets to go can take advantage of them. But with budget cuts and training cuts, they're not even able to pay, in a lot of cases, their own employees and staff because they're not able to produce enough content and enough value to keep up. And so you're seeing their support shrinking, and you're seeing that the ways that worked 10 and 15 years ago to help us build and broker those public-private partnerships are a dying breed now. So, and when I put it down there that there's cannibalization, What that means is that some of these organizations, they have rules that Group A can't have an event on the same day that Group B is having it because the same people want to attend both. But then other people can't attend one or the other because they can't get the time off of work, so they have to choose. Maybe they don't get either. The access has dramatically changed, shifted, and diminished with the cuts in budgets. The demand for the folks to be focused on their direct work and not on building those relationships outside of the office. And, it's almost impossible to get your feds for breakfast, lunch, and dinner anymore because they're working from home too. So all of these types of disruptions have almost eliminated a good FEDucation type of approach. This has created a significant performance gap. People want the jobs and careers, but they're not able to go to the places and the organizations to network and make a name for themselves and get known anymore. People want the qualifications for jobs, but if you talk to any recruiters, the companies already want people to have the qualifications for those jobs. Well, chicken or the egg? How do you get there if you can't get in the door? And how do you get in the door if you've not already been there? This is a common problem that has caused such a disruption in federal program management and project management jobs, even executive jobs and official jobs. We have a rapidly retiring workforce, and our younger workforce that would like to be eligible for the jobs can't afford free internships to go try it out because they're working 2, 3, and 4 jobs to pay what expenses they do have, and they're drowning in student debt. So they're not able to spend thousands of dollars if they can actually get access to that federal training, which is messed up. And federal training that I've attended, you either have to be able to fund a master's degree, you have to have an employer that offers tuition reimbursement programs that are almost non-existent now. Maybe you can get some through an internal learning management system, but what quality is it? A lot of folks, if they work for a large company, they may have access to Recipient or Skillsoft. I went in and took a number of those courses on topics relevant to my disciplines. None of them had a federal approach, so they were only partially helpful in getting me to my goal. Relocation subsidies have dried up. So if you can qualify for a job, can you even afford to move and get there? And if you can't afford to move and get there, you can't be there for day one, let alone live in perpetuity. In many cases in a large city where rents and costs of living are higher and require transportation pre and post COVID. So having the money to go get the job is an issue. So I believe from everything that I've seen over my span of time in the industry is that virtual work is here to stay to a great extent, and distance learning is still here to stay. So I have created FEDucation, and I'd like to talk to you about 3 ways that FEDucation can benefit you. The first is as an investor, the second is as a contributor, and the third is as a receiver. If you're going to invest in FEDucation, that means you still have a need to acquire federal content that is relevant and specific to doing business with the federal government. We're creating that content. The question is, do you need that content on your platform, or do you need to invest in content that is co-produced that goes on publicly accessible platforms? So in the federal government and in those contractor companies that support the federal government, many of them have internal learning management systems. And as I mentioned before, much of that content is commercial and not specific to the federal government, its guidance, its laws, and its regulations. There are internal repository spaces where that content can be stored. We are currently negotiating with different apps and platforms where we know that federal FEDucation initiatives are taking place so that we can move our content to those platforms to have a wider distribution and wider access. And we're producing the content as a service model. We're also looking to put out content and advertising and outreach on public available platforms such as Udemy and YouTube. And we also have a strategy to release all of our content announcements on a scheduled process through different apps that are very popular with the federal demographic. And some of the most popular ones I'm sure you're already familiar with, like LinkedIn, Udemy, and Facebook. But there are others emerging that are quite popular, and we have the folks that are smart about those apps and those platforms and those models that are building that presence and that following for us to help you leverage. Next is as a contributor. Maybe you need to help build your brand, whether that's selling a product, selling a service, and educating about it. No one wants a sales pitch. What people do want is data. They want information. They want facts. They want truth. And they want to be educated appropriately. So how you go about using FEDucation to do that is very straight and simple. You create that content and you make it as informational as possible, and you put it out there for people to learn about. People are smart. They can make their own purchasing decision. They know to reach out to you if they have a question or an interest in what you have to say in the federal space. And we don't have a lot of time in our day jobs to go and create a request for information or gather the information we need to respond to an RFP or get up to speed and manage our continuing professional education credits in tandem of having a full-time job and whatever obligations we have outside of work. So using this model as a contributor and creating FEDucation content with us will help establish your subject matter expertise, your product or service in an appropriate way without being salesy or pushy. There are two really good ways to do this. Do it yourself, which is great. Go for it. I'm here to encourage you to take advantage of this market and this opportunity. Next, you can bring the content to us. We can help format it in an appropriate way to help tell the story on multiple platforms. We integrate it and do the editing and the filming and the packaging, and we market it. That's a pretty nominal cost. We are learning how to make the sausage more efficiently every time we roll out a course. So that helps us to have a process and a framework. It's giving us a methodology and a way to apply our lessons learned and best practices to make your experience a positive one. Or you can hand the whole thing over to us. We can produce the content, we can integrate it, and we can market it. That's a more expensive value proposition. However, we're good at it. We are building it already. We have a massive amount of front-end investment in making this a success, and we are already successful at it. So I would like to believe that our past performance is going to be speaking for us very soon. You can advertise and promote the content that you contribute. I think that's good. You can work with us and team up with us, and we can leverage our advertising and outreach on social media and through our networks and platforms. I think that's a better value proposition and approach. It's a little more expensive because we are paying more for our resources and their time to build that into our established framework using our methodologies. So I think that's a better value proposition to help you reach the most folks in your target audience and your target demographics. We are also relying on other advertising and other outreach. I consider that a bonus, but to me, all three of those being leveraged equate to best value. And so that really, as a contributor, is an investment as well on your part and our part. Most importantly, I want to talk for a moment about the recipient of FEDucation, who is now an at-home or at work, or both at the same time, viewer. Offering FEDucation online gives someone access at a time that's convenient for them, anytime. It's more affordable. You're going to pay less than $100 or a couple of $100 for modules as opposed to thousands of dollars. And you're getting the same quality instructors, you're getting versions of the same content, you're just getting it a lot easier. We have to create it once, and it can be viewed many times. And I don't have to fly to DC from Florida twice a month to say the same things over and over again to different audiences and wear myself out. So I'm a big fan of this model. We are institutionalizing in our methodology versions of micro-learning and scaled learning. I am able to distill a lot of content into a very small amount of time in this model, where it would take me days to go over the material 3 or 4 or 5 times in a classroom to make sure that dozens of people were able to follow along and progress with many different learning styles that may or may not work for everyone, and may be very frustrating for those more introverted learners who can certainly come up to speed, but for whom a very heavy, dense, populated classroom environment is not a good one for them. Next, our content in FEDucation is usable to the learner. So if you're taking our content and learning something from it, it's coming from a reputable source. I'm going directly to the laws, the regulations, and the standards, and teaching it at the federal level, and using the department, agency, and component level standards to make sure that it makes sense from a federal perspective in terms of regulatory, policy, and compliance issues, as well as at the practitioner level, at the department or agency, since there are nuances to it. So we're going to give you real content from real experts who can teach you sort of the FEDucation masterclass in these concepts. We keep it less than 2 hours, and we keep it less than $200 per session. No one can compete with that in the marketplace. And I am doing something now that is agnostic of whatever certifications and training qualifications you need. Whether you have, for instance, a Project Management Institute Project Management Professional certification, they use something called a Continuous Education Unit. Whether you're pursuing your Federal Acquisition certification or your Defense Acquisition Workforce certification, and you use Continuous Learning Points or CLPs, we're working with platforms that will print out your certificate for your time and your topic, customized to you, and those can be transferable into any of these certifications and should satisfy all of your continuous professional education requirements. Here are some examples of my current offerings. In 2021, we are launching 15 of these in the Federal Project, Program, and Portfolio Management series. I built these myself based on the content that I have accumulated over about 15 to 20 years of teaching this. And from here, you'll be able to see and sample some of the work that we're doing. You'll be able to decide if this FEDucation approach is appropriate to you, and you'll have a way to reach out to us on our website at zenfederal.com to let us know how you'd like to be involved. I thank you for watching, and I invite you to reach out to me and engage us and our team as we continue to produce FEDucation online at an accessible price point in a real-time environment as a service. Thank you so much for your time.